My parents disappeared with my gifted sister, abandoning me when I was 14 years old. I, 34 meters, am a children's book illustrator based in New York. My latest series, A Dreams in Watercolor, has been on the New York Times bestseller list for 12 consecutive weeks, and my gallery exhibition, Childhood Memories and Strokes, is currently touring major cities across the country. My work has been featured in The New Yorker, and I recently won the Caldecott Medal for my illustrations in The Forgotten Garden. Life wasn't always this successful. 20 years ago, I was a 14-year-old boy who loved art but was constantly told it was worthless. Yesterday, my past came crashing back when my parents, 65 FS, 63 meters, suddenly appeared at my grandmother's house, where I was visiting during a break between exhibition tours. They stood there, with forced smiles and designer clothes that couldn't hide their desperation, calling my name as if the past 20 years of abandonment never happened. The same parents who left me behind when I was 14, taking my sister with them but leaving me alone in an empty house. Let me provide some background about my family and how we got here. My parents were the epitome of academic elitism in Boston's competitive educational circle. My mother graduated from Harvard Medical School and worked as a medical researcher at Massachusetts General Hospital, publishing numerous papers in prestigious medical journals. My father, a Yale graduate, taught AP chemistry at one of the most competitive prep schools in New England. They firmly believed that a person's worth was determined solely by their academic credentials and future earning potential. From my earliest memories, our house felt more like a prestigious academic institution than a home. The walls were lined with academic awards, medical journals, and certificates of achievement. Dinner conversations revolved around acceptance rates at Ivy League schools and the latest research papers. My parents hosted regular dinner parties where they would parade my sister's academic achievements in front of their equally elitist friends. My sister was their crown jewel, perfect SAT scores by junior year, straight A's in all AP classes, and president of both the science club and math team. She was being groomed for medical school from the moment she could read. And to her credit, she was naturally brilliant at academics, though I sometimes caught her staring longingly at the basketball court during her mandatory study hours. But I was different. From the moment I could hold a crayon, I was drawn to art. While other kids were learning their ABCs, I was creating entire stories through pictures. My preschool teachers praised my artistic abilities, but my parents dismissed it as cute but impractical. They kept pushing academic flashcards and educational videos, but I would always find my way back to my sketchbook. By middle school, the divide between my parents' expectations and my reality became a gaping chasm. My grades were wildly inconsistent. I could get an A+ in literature when we studied poetry and imagery, but would barely pass algebra despite hours of forced tutoring. Art class was my sanctuary. I won the statewide Young Artist competition 3 years in a row, but my parents never once attended the ceremonies. Mr. Thompson, my art teacher at Franklin Middle School, became my first real advocate. He recognized not just my technical skills, but my unique way of storytelling through images. "You have a gift," he would tell me, staying after school to teach me new techniques. "Your art speaks to people's hearts." He tried reaching out to my parents multiple times, sending notes about art school scholarships and future career opportunities in animation and illustration. Those notes always ended up in the trash, often accompanied by my father's signature scoff. The contrast between my sister's life and mine became more pronounced as we grew older. She had private tutors for every subject, attended academic summer camps at prestigious universities, and got new clothes for every academic achievement. Meanwhile, I wore her hand-me-downs despite being a boy, ate whatever leftovers remained after their family dinners, which I was often told to skip to focus on improving my grades, and spent summers alone in my room while they took my sister on college campus tours. The only bright spots at home were the rare moments with my sister. She would sometimes sneak into my room late at night, bringing snacks from her study sessions and helping me with my math homework. "Your drawings are amazing," she'd whisper, carefully looking through my sketchbook. "I wish I could create something like this." Those moments of connection were precious, but always tinged with the knowledge that openly supporting me would put her in our parents' crosshairs. Life at home became increasingly isolated. My parents stopped acknowledging my presence unless it was to point out another academic failure. They installed a washing machine in the basement with an instructional video nearby, their way of telling me I needed to handle my own laundry. Meals became something I had to scrounge from the refrigerator when they weren't around. My room became both my sanctuary and my prison, filled with art supplies I'd saved up for by collecting recyclables and doing neighbors' yard work. Then came that Tuesday in April, the day everything changed. Mr. Thompson had just reviewed my portfolio and was ecstatic. "This is college-level work," he declared, showing me brochures from various art schools. "With your talent, you could get a full scholarship." For the first time, I felt like my future had real possibilities. I remember practically floating home, my mind full of dreams about art school and a future where I could be myself. But when I opened the front door, the house felt different. Empty. The usual sounds of my sister's study music and my father's typing were absent. The silence was deafening. On the dining room table, the same table where I wasn't allowed to eat with them, sat a note. The handwriting was my father's, precise and cold. "Your sister is transferring to a new school. We've made this house livable for you." That was it. No explanation, no contact information, no goodbye. They had taken my sister and left me behind, like unwanted furniture in an abandoned house. I collapsed there in the hallway, my portfolio scattered across the floor, drawings mixing with my tears. Hours passed as I sat there, trying to understand what I had done to deserve such complete abandonment. The house grew dark, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Every creak and settle of the house made me hope, foolishly, that they would come back, that this was just some elaborate lesson about academic dedication. As the shock began to fade, practical fears set in. I was 14. How was I supposed to live alone? What about food, bills, school expenses? That's when a memory surfaced through my panic: my grandfather. Before my father's unexplained falling out with him, we used to visit him regularly. He worked as a caretaker at a foster home and always had a special smile for me, never once questioning my love for art. After hours of searching through drawers and old papers, I found an address book buried beneath the landline phone. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, praying it was still current. When his warm voice answered, I broke down completely. Through my tears, I managed to explain what had happened. Without hesitation, he said words I'll never forget: "I'll come right away, sweetheart. Pack whatever matters to you." My grandfather arrived in record time, considering he lived 2 hours away. When he saw me, dirty clothes, tear-stained face, surrounded by my art supplies, he didn't say a word. He just hugged me, stroking my hair with a gentleness I had almost forgotten existed in the world. "You're beautiful, Art," he whispered, looking at my scattered drawings. "Let's get you and your talent somewhere safe." The next few years with my grandfather changed my life completely. He lived in a small town in western Massachusetts, in an old house surrounded by nature. My new school was nothing like my old one: smaller, more nurturing, with teachers who saw me as a whole person, not just a grade point average. For the first time, I could breathe. Through some legal maneuvering, I later learned he had threatened my parents with child services and public exposure. My grandfather managed to get them to provide basic financial support. But that was the extent of their involvement. I never saw them, never heard from them, never received so much as a birthday card. My grandfather became my biggest supporter. He transformed the sunroom into an art studio, picking up supplies from yard sales and flea markets. "Art supplies are an investment in your future," he would say, even when money was tight. He attended every art show, photographed every piece I created, and helped me build my first portfolio. Working part-time jobs through high school, I saved every penny for art school. My grades improved too, not because of pressure, but because my teachers helped me find connections between art and other subjects. Geometry became about perspective and composition. Chemistry helped me understand pigments and color theory. History gave me inspiration for illustrations. I won a partial scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design, and through a combination of student loans, part-time work, and my grandfather's unwavering support, I made it through. College was transformative. I found my style, my voice, and my community. My thesis project, a children's book about a young artist finding his way, caught the attention of a small publishing house. The road to success wasn't easy. My first books barely made enough to cover my student loan payments. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, took freelance jobs, and sometimes wondered if my parents had been right about art being impractical. But I kept pushing, kept creating, kept believing in the path my grandfather had helped me find. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed. My book, The Forgotten Garden, inspired by my grandfather's garden and his nurturing spirit, resonated with children and parents alike. The illustration spoke to something universal about growing up different, finding your own path, and the power of unconditional love. The success that followed still feels surreal sometimes. Which brings me to yesterday, when my parents suddenly appeared at my grandfather's house. They had clearly been following my success. They quoted reviews of my work and mentioned my recent awards. But their polished appearance couldn't hide their desperate situation. Through mutual acquaintances, I've learned the truth about their current circumstances. My mother faces multiple harassment lawsuits at the hospital, particularly concerning her treatment of male patients and staff from a lesser of educational backgrounds. My father was forced to resign after recordings surfaced of his bullying students and younger teachers, mocking their academic credentials and future prospects. "We're family," they insisted yesterday, standing on my grandfather's porch. "Family should support each other." But as I stood there, looking at these people who had abandoned me when I needed them most, who had only returned now that I was successful and they were in trouble, I felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty. I refused them outright. They became angry, shouting about filial duty and family obligations. The same parents who had deemed me unworthy of their time and love now demanded my support. The situation escalated until neighbors called the police, who issued a temporary restraining order. My grandfather, now in his 80s but still my rock, held my hand through it all. Looking at him, I saw what real family means: not blood ties or obligations, but love, support, and acceptance. As I write this, I'm still processing everything. My latest book tour is on hold while I deal with this situation. My parents are trying to contact me through various means, insisting that blood is thicker than water, and that I have an obligation to help them. Some extended family members have started calling, trying to guilt me into doing the right thing. But sitting here in my grandfather's sunroom, surrounded by the art supplies he's still collecting for me, just because, I know I'm already doing the right thing. I'm thinking about taking legal action to officially sever any remaining ties, but part of me wonders about my sister. Last I heard, she had left the country years ago, unable to bear our parents' controlling nature any longer. Sometimes I wonder if she knows about my success, if she's seen my books, if she remembers those late-night moments when she was the only one who believed in me. Has anyone else dealt with toxic parents trying to reconnect after achieving success? How did you handle it? I know I'm right to protect myself and my grandfather, but decades of their emotional manipulation still leave their mark. Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and messages. The situation has escalated significantly in the past 48 hours, and I need to share what's happened. My parents showed up at my grandfather's house again yesterday morning, this time with a lawyer. They stood in the front yard, shouting about family obligations and filial responsibility. My mother was waving legal documents, claiming they could force me to provide financial support under state law. The scene was surreal. My father, who once refused to acknowledge my existence unless it was to criticize my waste of time artwork, was now crying about how proud he'd always been of my natural talent. My mother, who used to mock my art teacher's career suggestions, suddenly claimed she'd always supported my creative pursuits. Our neighbors came out when they heard the commotion. Mrs. Sullivan, who's lived next door to my grandfather for 30 years, was shocked to learn these well-dressed people were the same parents who had abandoned their 14-year-old son. She immediately called the police while her husband started recording the incident. When the officers arrived, my parents tried to paint themselves as concerned parents attempting to reconnect with their successful son. However, several neighbors stepped forward with statements about my grandfather raising me alone since I was 14. The officers were particularly interested in learning that my parents had left a minor alone with just a note. Officer Martinez was incredibly understanding. She explained that my parents' current financial difficulties don't create any legal obligation for me to support them, regardless of their claims. She helped us file for an emergency restraining order based on their harassment and the distress they're causing my grandfather. The most revealing moment came when my mother, frustrated by the police presence, snapped and started ranting about academic pedigree and how she couldn't understand how her failure of a son had become more successful than her. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the same elitist bully who had made my childhood miserable. After they were escorted away, our neighbors organized an informal neighborhood watch. They're keeping an eye out for my parents' car and have agreed to document any future contact attempts. Mr. Sullivan even provided security camera footage for our records. My lawyer says we have a strong case for a permanent restraining order. She's also investigating whether their abandonment of me as a minor could have legal implications now. I'm not interested in pursuing charges, but she thinks having this information might help keep them away. What's particularly striking is how this situation has revealed the true meaning of community and family. The neighbors have shown more concern and support than my biological parents ever did. Mr. Sullivan brings my grandfather fresh bread every morning, and Mrs. Chen from across the street installed additional security lights free of charge. My grandfather is handling everything with remarkable strength, but I'm worried about the stress this is causing him. He keeps saying he's fine, but I've noticed he gets tired more easily. I've decided to extend my stay here and work remotely for a while. My publisher has been understanding about postponing some appearances. The hardest part is the complex emotions this brings up. Even as I stand firm in my decision, there's a small part of me, that abandoned 14-year-old boy, that still wants to understand why. Why wasn't I good enough then? Why do they only want me now? But then I look at my grandfather, who loved me unconditionally when they couldn't love me at all, and I know I'm making the right choice. I've started a new art series about this, therapeutic drawings capturing emotions I can't quite put into words. My grandfather watches me work sometimes, just like he did when I was 14 and newly arrived at his house. Yesterday he said something that really stuck with me: they may have given you life, but you gave yourself permission to live it. Several people have asked about my sister. I still have no contact with her, but this situation has made me think about her a lot. I hope she's found her own path to freedom. Update 2, something unexpected happened today. My sister showed up at my grandfather's house. She's changed so much I almost didn't recognize her at first. Her hair is longer, pulled back in a casual ponytail, and she has a photographer's tan from working outdoors. But her smile when he said my name was exactly the same as I remembered. I learned she's been working as a travel photographer, documenting cultures and landscapes around the world. She saw me on the news in Rome when I won the Caldecott Medal and has been following my career since then. Your illustrations tell stories that transcend language, she said, showing me some of my books she collected from different countries. Over cups of my grandfather's chamomile tea, she shared her story. During her senior year of college, surrounded by peers pursuing their own diverse passions, she began questioning our parents' rigid academic values. The final straw came when she discovered they'd been secretly monitoring her college activities and trying to manipulate her course selections to align with their medical school plans. "One day, I just couldn't take it anymore," she explained. "I left a note saying don't look for me and bought a one-way ticket to Europe." She started with odd jobs in hostels, eventually discovering a talent for photography. A travel magazine noticed her work on social media, and she's been traveling the world on photography assignments ever since. Then she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Liam, I'm so sorry. I should have contacted you sooner. I was a coward, focused only on my escape." Her voice cracked as she continued, "Every time I saw children reading your books in different countries, I thought about the little brother who used to show me his drawings late at night. I couldn't hold back my own tears. We talked about those nights when she'd sneak me snacks and help with homework, both of us trapped in our parents' suffocating expectations. You were the only one who saw me back then," I told her. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, just like she used to when I was struggling with math problems. She also shared what she knows about our parents' downfall. Their behavior had apparently gotten worse after she left. Without either of us to control, they became increasingly tyrannical at work. Mom started harassing female patients who didn't meet her educational standards, while Dad's verbal abuse of students and younger teachers finally caught up with him when someone recorded his tirades. My grandfather watched our reunion from his favorite armchair, occasionally wiping away tears. When we asked about lunch, he disappeared into the kitchen and emerged with his special candied sweet potatoes, the same ones he used to make for our rare childhood visits. The taste brought back memories of simpler times, before our parents' ambitions poisoned everything. Over dessert, we made plans for the future. My sister's next photography project is based in New York, just a few hours away. We're going to have monthly family dinners here at grandfather's house, real family dinners, filled with love and acceptance instead of academic pressure and criticism. Sometimes I wonder if they ever loved us, my sister mused as we looked through old photos my grandfather had kept. Maybe in their own twisted way, I replied, but they loved their idea of success more. She nodded, understanding perfectly. Before leaving, my sister hugged me tightly and whispered, "No more 20-year gaps, okay? You're stuck with me now, little brother." For the first time since our parents reappeared, I felt completely at peace with my decisions. Their abandonment led us here, to a kind of freedom and family bond they could never understand. My grandfather summed it up perfectly after she left: sometimes families aren't born, they're built on love, understanding, and second chances. He's right, as always. While our parents tried to force us into their mold of success, life had different plans. My sister found her art through a camera lens, I found mine through illustration, and together we found our way back to what family should be. Thank you all for the supportive comments. Yes, we're maintaining the restraining order against our parents. Our new family may be smaller, but it's built on a stronger foundation than academic credentials could ever provide. Update 3, it's been 2 weeks since my sister's unexpected return, and I feel like I can finally share how things have settled into place. Today, something beautiful happened that perfectly captures our new reality. My grandfather surprised us by making his special candied sweet potatoes, the same ones he used to make during those rare childhood visits when our parents would actually let us come here. "I've been waiting years to see you two share these again," he said, his eyes twinkling as he set the dish on the table. My sister and I exchanged glances and laughed, both remembering how she used to secretly save some for me when our parents weren't looking. Over the sweet potatoes, we learned more details about our parents' current situation through mutual acquaintances. The full story is worse than we initially thought. Dad's harassment at the hospital wasn't just about educational credentials, he'd been making inappropriate advances toward female patients from what he considered suitable academic backgrounds. Meanwhile, Mom's bullying at school had escalated to the point where several students developed anxiety disorders, leading to multiple lawsuits from parents. They've lost everything they once used to judge others by. The medical board revoked Dad's license after multiple complaints, and Mom was fired when recordings of her berating younger teachers about their inferior degrees went viral in educational circles. The lawsuits forced them to pay substantial settlements, draining their savings and retirement funds. Now they're working entry-level jobs under supervisors they once would have dismissed as academically inferior. Dad's stocking shelves at a pharmacy chain, and Mom's doing administrative work at a community college, both under managers who only have high school diplomas. It's a particularly ironic twist of fate, but as my sister said, maybe they'll finally learn that human value isn't measured by degrees. But, honestly, their downfall is no longer our concern. We're focused on building something new and beautiful from the ashes of our past. My sister made an amazing suggestion today. We're going to have monthly family dinners at grandfather's house. Real family dinners where no one gets excluded and there's no academic interrogation over the meatloaf. She's relocating her photography business to New York, just a few hours away. Her latest project involves documenting intergenerational family relationships across cultures, inspired, she says, by watching our grandfather with us. "I'm illustrating a new children's book about finding your true family," and yes, there's definitely a sweet grandfather character who bakes magical sweet potatoes. Speaking of our grandfather, he's absolutely blossoming with both of us around. Today he dug out a box of old artwork and photographs he'd saved over the years, drawings I thought were lost forever, secret photos he'd taken of my sister playing basketball when she was supposed to be studying. "I always knew you both had different dreams," he told us. "I just waited for the day you'd be free to follow them." We spent hours going through that box, sharing memories and healing old wounds. My sister found a sketch I'd made of her when we were kids, studying late at night in her room. I found a photo she'd secretly taken of me drawing in the backyard, covered in chalk dust and completely happy. Our grandfather had preserved these pieces of our true selves all these years. The contrast between our old family dinners and today's gathering couldn't be more stark. Instead of tense silence broken only by interrogations about grades and test scores, our conversation flowed freely between my sister's travel stories, my latest illustrations, and our grandfather's gentle wisdom. We laughed until we cried over the sweet potatoes, which somehow taste even better than we remembered. As the evening wrapped up, my sister and I helped clean the kitchen, something our parents never would have allowed us to do because it took time away from studying. Our grandfather watched us working together, tears in his eyes. "This," he said, "this is what family really means. We've decided to maintain the restraining order against our parents. Their repeated attempts to contact us through various means have only strengthened our resolve." As my sister said, they had their chance to be family. They chose academic prestige instead. Looking ahead, we're planning to renovate part of grandfather's house. My sister is converting the old study into a darkroom for her photography, and I'm setting up a proper art studio in the sunroom where I first started drawing after moving here. These spaces represent everything our parents tried to suppress, our true passions, our real talents, our authentic selves. Our grandfather summed it up perfectly as we were leaving tonight: sometimes families aren't born, they're built on love, understanding, and second chances. He's right, as always. While our parents tried to force us into their mold of success, life had different plans. My sister found her art through a camera lens, I found mine through illustration, and together we found our way back to what family should be. To everyone who's followed our story and offered support, thank you. We're proof that sometimes losing a toxic family is the first step to finding your real one. For those asking about legal matters, yes, we're maintaining both restraining orders. And no, we've had no direct contact with our parents. Our family may be smaller now, but it's built on a stronger foundation than academic credentials could ever provide.